Thank you all for joining us for a very topical discussion. We all know that including the patient voice is more important than ever when it comes to drug development. Our experts today explore how the industry can do better. I would like to introduce our host for this afternoon's think tank, our 12th panel of the day, and our panel. Barry Greene, a 2020 Red Jacket honoree, joined Alnylam, which is harnessing the potential of RNAi therapeutics to transform the lives of people living with diseases for which there are limited or inadequate treatment options in 2003. He has more than 25 years of experience in healthcare, pharmaceutical, and biotechnology industries. Also joining us are Jack Barrette. He's a 2019, 2006, and 2005 PharmaVOICE 100, who has created a premier online home for consumer health activists. He is a lifelong marketer, serial entrepreneur, and internet pioneer. Barby Ingle, a 2020 PharmaVOICE 100, is a chronic pain educator, patient advocate, as well as a motivational speaker and author on pain topics. She has been a pain patient since developing endometriosis in 1997 and reflex sympathetic dystrophy in 2002. Late last year, Barby wrapped up taping season 9 of the live digital TV webisode of The Ken and Barby Show with her husband, Ken Taylor, and she will be appearing on Dance It Out season 2 in 2021 on Lifetime TV Network. And Roslyn Schneider, MD, is a 2018 PharmaVOICE 100 who has spent her career, including her tenure as Global Patient Affairs Lead, driving patient centricity within Pfizer's medical organization. She's focusing on patient-centric transformation of the biopharmaceutical industry. For more information about our panelists, please go to pharmavoice100.com. And now I'd like to introduce our host, Barry Greene from Alnylam, who's going to talk about why the patient voice is so important to him.
Yeah, well, look, being involved in breakthrough understandings of science that leads to innovative products that have meaningful impact on patients and their diseases is just awe-inspiring, frankly. And we get anecdotes, patient anecdotes from our field teams around the world. And those anecdotes are wonderful. When you hear that you've given someone their life back and they can assume their life, they can go back to school, go back to work, take care of their children again. It really reminds us of why we work so hard and why we work for the patients every day.
So I'll turn to you, Barry. I mean, how is your organization working through some of this in terms of putting the patient at the center of what you're doing?
Yeah, Taren, as you mentioned up front, everybody at Alnylam is focused on doing what's right for patients. We actually started really as a science-based company. We were trying to get this technology to work. It took about a decade for that to happen. But as it was clear that we were going to be developing important medicines, we turned to the patients. We listened to the patients. We work with patient advocacy groups. And one of the things that our industry does well is support patients when that becomes the focus of the company. So we didn't put a chief patient officer in per se. We do have people that work with patient groups, but everyone from the top talks about let's do what's right for patients first and then worry about everything else second. And we measure people on doing what's right for patients and supporting each other. We have explicit conversations, for example, with our field teams that say, if you ever think you're hearing me say something about driving revenue, I might be talking to Wall Street analysts about that or others, because we run a business, we have to understand revenues and costs, otherwise we won't be here. But we really want you to focus on doing what's right for patients. And we have stories every day of how hard people have worked together to do what's right for patients.
Excellent. And Barby, in your experience when you've been working with pharmaceutical companies, what is it that you tell them that you need from them?
First thing is communication and setting the expectation. I'm going to give my true opinion and the actual things that I've been through as a patient, but also what I'm hearing from other patients that have participated in clinical trials and why it went well, why it didn't go well, things that they can do to improve. And I'm hoping that working with multiple pharmaceutical companies over the years, that they will each grow and take what the other ones are doing well and enhance that, and give us that feeling like they're on the micro level with us in the patient population of whatever medication or tool that they're trying to create for us, versus the TV commercial that they would put on TV. You have to plant seeds for the public, but we actually need help in the now, not necessarily in the future. So we're looking for the micro level of help that those pharmaceutical companies are able to offer if they stop and listen and pay attention to what's being said.
Excellent. And Jack, what are you finding in aggregate from some of the research you do through your WEGO Health? And I know you have a big database of advocates and patient leaders. So what are they telling you?
We absolutely get asked really often, and we ask our members what should pharma companies do better? How could they be more effective? And there's kind of three things I've boiled it down to wildly oversimplify. One thing is as Barby said, and Barry said it as well, is a patient opinion leader ad board, right? You have a KOL ad board of physicians who's talking to you about the science, and they're talking to you about how they're treating their patients, but have patients elevated at that same level. And it's surprising how few companies look at that at a corporate level or even at a franchise level, and instead go back to market research. So that's a you can do it tomorrow step. It's not wildly expensive. It's incredibly exciting and invigorating. So if you're working in the pain space and Barbie is not on your patient leader advisory board, you're missing out, right? You can get that tremendous experience from her. The second one is, as Barry said, building a culture of collaboration with patients. I mean, I can tell you, I get asked a lot about, what companies get it, what companies on the patient side, and we've worked enough with Alnylam that it is a pretty remarkable culture there. There's a very we versus they on the patient side, and that's something that comes from a cultural level. And I think that nothing about patients without patients is a belief that isn't just on a poster on the wall when people are really talking about patients, that they spend time with them, and the company's invested in getting even executives and the marketing team to get out there and spend time with patients, that you can tell it's part of the culture. So building that culture from the start, from the top is critical. And the last one that we talk about, which is maybe a little tactical, but important, is striving for authenticity in your patient marketing. I mean, Barby just said, TV commercials are great, but the COVID world is a great time to lose the big budget TV shoot and work with patient communities to create authentic, genuine content that really speaks in their voice, really respects their entire lives, as we talked about, and changes behavior, right? Scrap the Super Bowl ad, work with patient influencers who can really get some things done for you. And, for God's sake, lose the Kardashians' phone numbers. This is the time to, there's more than one Kardashian that's working with a pharma company. Said that's not the right direction, but influencers like Barby, like folks who are really talking with maybe, sign up a POL advisory board, build a culture of collaboration, and strive for authenticity in your outreach.
I think those are three great tips right there. So thank you for condensing it. Appreciate it. Roz, I'm going to talk to you because you really were the spearhead within Pfizer for when they put together their patient coalition. So talk to us a little bit about that experience.
I think it's just as Jack just said, which is you have to embrace the idea of patients and their care partners and families as experts, and not instead of talking to physicians. Yes, I'm a physician and I bring something also, if you ask me, about caring for patients in practice for 20 years, but it's not the same as asking the people who I cared for and cared with. So it's a mindset of every time we think of our expert group, our physicians, our scientists, statisticians, whoever you're going to name, right? Patients should be in that same group. And now how we get the voices to ensure that it's influencers who are very attuned to what's going on in clinical research and in medicine, but also that we have representative voices from people who don't necessarily know this whole process, but who are also the people who will be taking these medicines or using our devices or diagnostics. So I think it's about having the mindset, embracing patients as experts, but also changing our actual processes. So every company has a roadmap, right, of development and stage gates to go from one step to the next, whether it's an investment or size of our clinical studies or communications and promotions, all of that. There are stops where you ask your experts before you make your decisions. So again, making sure that in an iterative way, we're asking experts, including patients. So, and writing that in so that it's an expectation where, Barry has very clearly outlined that at Alnylam, this is an expectation within the company. If it's not part of, when you say, this is the point where we're going to figure out whether we can have a certain level of probability of technical and regulatory success. And in order to determine that, we're going to bring in all of these experts. Again, patients have to be among those experts.
I think Roz has a great point with, she didn't quite say it this way, but the end user. If you're making a medication for a sickle cell patient, you should probably have some patient influencers that are Black, because it affects the Black community, the African American community the most. And I've seen studies go through that. I look at the clinical trial information after the trial's done and say, but wait, they're not even included in this study. They have regional pain, and this is about full body, or full body versus regional. There's a lot of different things that have to be looked at and taken into consideration with each clinical trial. You have to keep the end user of whatever you're creating in mind.
Excellent. One of the comments, and this is getting a little bit touchy here, is in their chat room, is that as long as companies incent based on script acquisition and not retention, the patient is not at the center. This is a hard culture to break. What are you hearing some companies doing to exercise the principles of the FDA guidance, patient-focused drug development, or the PFDD? Are you all familiar with this? And Roz, you're saying yes. So I'll start with you.
Sure. So patient-focused drug development at FDA has a very specific definition and a set of guidances that have come out of that, as well as the 21st Century Cures legislation. And I think that has helped us to have the health authority backing, so that they're pushing and they're also adapting, so that we don't have companies or anybody else using this as an excuse to not involve patients, to say that, well, we can do all of this, but the health authorities are going to say X, Y, Z. The whole system is evolving to say that it is important specifically within medicine development and also within devices, to listen to patients and to understand what's most important to them, and to put them in the order that makes sense for the patient community, and at the same time have the outline of what rigor is needed to be able to bring that forward to a health authority, to be able to include that in the package of approval, so that they can do their jobs. So it's a matter of something that is evolving over time, to make sure that we understand both the science with patient input, and also what I say is the science of patient input, that has that robust kind of nature that would be able to be included as evidence. Because there's a difference in understanding and getting a feel for things and the landscape, versus what you can include as evidence to a health authority.
Excellent.
Just getting back to the chat room question, again, without getting into technical details, I think the question suggested that if you've got field-based people, salespeople, and they're only incented on patient acquisition, they might be driven very focused on not being focused on the patient, but on getting scripts in. And that may be true, but the challenge to that organization is, what else can you incent them to do? Again, I'll give you an Alnylam example, because that's where I've lived for the last 17 years. When COVID hit, we had our hereditary TTR amyloidosis patients with polyneuropathy on a once every 3 week IV. Some of these patients were getting seen in major medical institutions, all of which closed down immediately as COVID hit. Our teams, including our field-based teams, worked around the clock to move those patients to alternative sites of care. It wasn't in their incentive comp per se, but it was the right thing to do. And back to Jack's point, when the culture from the very top is, I want you to do what's right for patients, that's your job, then all these other components can get built around it. If the tone from the top is drive revenue, satisfy Wall Street, well, guess what's going to happen to that company? We've seen examples of that.
Yes, we have. Excellent point. Jack, you want to jump in?
I would probably broaden a little bit past the PFDD, and I think we're getting to the, what I talked about in our prep for this a little bit, which is kind of the business case for patient involvement, right? And it's that, yes, your programs will be more effective when the motivation behind all of it is to help the patient. And that's it. That can sound to folks who maybe joined Alnylam from another company like a feel-good thing that's just a nice to have, but it's not. It's a differentiator. It's a difference between a company that will succeed in the long term and one that won't. And we've seen it time and again in the companies that we've worked with and the teams we've worked with, that those teams who are just completely connected to their audience. We think of a part of the GSK organization where their folks were talking with lupus patients, and they wanted to bring the lupus patients into the big celebration at the company about how well the program had gone that included them, and bring them inside the organization. And that willingness to open the doors and say, these people are part of why this happens. They are why we do this, is something, again, you can't fake. In fact, the GSK said, yeah, that's okay. A lot of companies say, ooh, patients inside the building, that's a little scary. When you have those kind of barriers up, things don't happen as well. So, and I think that when you think about, every other industry puts voice of the customer as the center of how they design everything. And pharma may be the last place where that's considered part of it, but it's not. But that's the whole point. And it's not just because, again, it's the right thing to do, but when you know what the customer really is trying to get to, as Barby said, that overcoming the pain on the way to an appointment, or as Barry said, knowing that there's pain between attacks, that those are sometimes the breakthroughs that make the company successful. They usually are, right? They really differentiate you. So I think that's why we look at it as that from trial design to packaging to marketing, let's use the voice of the customer to differentiate as an organization, and that makes the case to maybe the Wall Street types, but it also helps to retain your team and build the differentiation of the company.
Excellent.
And I think we see that also as a commitment from, for example, the Business Roundtable, when they updated last year their statement of the purpose of a corporation, right? And in that first bullet, it's about delivering value to customers. Now, of course, it's customers because it's across different kinds of U.S. corporations, but and leading the way to meeting or exceeding the expectations of customers. You can't do that if you don't listen to your customers, to first know who they are and to know what they want. What are the expectations that we're trying to meet or exceed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, when folks at WEGO Health works a lot with pharma companies, and sometimes we get deep into the regulatory process where we're battling it out on a concept with the MLR teams, and when folks start to get a little down, we say stop and go have coffee with one of our patient leaders. Go spend some time connecting with our audience, and you come back a completely different person, right? You come back refreshed and rewound. I think that gets taken for granted as part of, this is why we're doing this, not selling cars. So it does really make a difference.
When I've been brought into pharmaceutical companies to tell my story, that's the exact message that I get, Jack. I get, wow, we are helping you, and to be in our labs, in our offices all day long and not realize that we're actually touching people's lives and changing and giving them more life. And to have a patient come in and hear their story is changing in a motivational and inspirational way for the staff at the pharmaceutical company.
Amazing. I could have this conversation with you all for another 2 hours, but unfortunately our time has come to an end. I want to thank Alnylam for their support of this very important conversation. We are at PharmaVOICE very much dedicated to that patient voice. We realize that this is the true north for the folks who are in this industry and why you all do what you do every day. So I can't thank you enough, Roz and Barry and Jack and Barbie, for being with us. Tremendous insights. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. And let's hope that the path forward is even smoother and it gets paved even quicker as we look to the future. Thank you so much.
For more PharmaVOICE 100 content, visit www.pharmavoice100.com.